You know what I love about Celine's cradle, Thane Kaler muttered to himself, jabbing a thumb at the cracked viewport. Absolutely nothing. The lunar dust bled across jagged crater edges, looking like someone had spilled the world's saddest sandbox. And here they were, the lucky inhabitants, perched on this celestial dust ball with all the charm of a broken toaster. Thane's lab was a mess, which was pretty much the decor style of choice on the moon. Tangled wires, cracked screens, and the faint smell of something burning that probably shouldn't be. But hey, if it ain't sparkin' or smellin' like roasted circuits, was it really science? The Colony Council had called another emergency meeting, which was always a treat. Nothing screamed progress like a room full of self-important suits arguing over scraps. Thane patted his pocket, reassuring himself that the data chip was still nestled there. He had a bombshell, and today was all about the fireworks. "Morning, Thane," a voice called from the doorway, dripping with the kind of cheerfulness best reserved for funerals. "Dahlia," Thane replied, not bothering to look up from the screen where he was attempting to make sense of the latest cosmic gibberish. "To what do I owe the displeasure?" Dahlia Jax, the Council's unofficial morale officer and official pain in the ass, strode in. Her boots clanked on the metal floor, a noise that somehow fit perfectly with her upbeat, relentless determination to see the silver lining in every dark moon rock. "Council meeting. They want your sunny disposition in attendance," she said, pulling up a chair. "Heard you got something big. Big enough to make us all wish we'd moved to Mars," Thane grumbled. He rubbed his eyes, hoping to scrape off fatigue like old paint. "Got aliens on our doorstep. Finally, some neighbors. I'll bake a pie," Dahlia quipped, her sarcasm sharp enough to shave with. "But seriously, how bad is it?" Thane leaned back, contemplating the ceiling as if it might have answers. "Bad enough that the little green men might not be so little, or green, or men for that matter." Dahlia's grin faded. "You're serious?" "Deadly," Thane replied, suddenly all business. His fingers drummed on the table. "Picked up a sequence, an algorithmic pattern in our scans that wasn't random cosmic noise." "Something's coming." Dahlia gave him a long, searching look, the kind that usually came before someone got institutionalized. "And what do you expect the Council to do about it? Pray, maybe. Although I'm starting to doubt even God knows what to do with this rock." Thane sighed. "Honestly, Dahlia, I expect them to argue until we're knee-deep in space invaders." "Well, let's not keep them waiting," she said, standing up. "Wouldn't want the apocalypse to start without us." The council chamber was predictably packed, a hodgepodge of lunar elite if such a thing existed. Thane settled into a chair, facing the steely glares of officials who'd long since forgotten how to smile. Councillor Harlan, a skeletal figure with the charm of a rusty scalpel, cleared his throat. "Kaler, you claim to have urgent data." His voice was the auditory equivalent of sandpaper. "Right," Thane said, slipping the chip onto the table and projecting its contents. A 3D model flickered into existence, swirling patterns that were as beautiful as they were terrifying. "Ladies and gentlemen, meet our uninvited guests." The room fell silent, save for the faint hum of the projector. A few counselors leaned forward, eyes narrowing like vultures spotting roadkill. "This is," Harlan began, but Thane cut him off. "Proof," Thane said. "Proof we're about to play host to the galaxy's worst block party." A ripple of unease spread across the room. Counselor Vex, a matronly figure who always looked like she was smelling something unpleasant, spoke up. "And what exactly are we looking at, Kaler?" "Patterns. Movement. The kind that doesn't happen naturally unless nature started taking night classes in advanced mathematics," Thane explained. "It's a fleet." "A fleet?" Vex's voice cracked like a whip. "Of what?" "Of whatever the hell decided Earth looked like a tasty snack," Thane replied, matter of fact. "This isn't a warning, it's a promise." The room erupted into a cacophony of voices, each counselor attempting to shout louder than the last. Thane let them have their moment, watching as they chewed over his revelation like a particularly tough piece of lunar jerky. Finally, Dahlia raised a hand, silencing the room with an efficiency that would have made a headmaster proud. So, what's our next move? Harlan, never one to resist the opportunity for pessimism, sneered. Move. What can we do? We're stuck here. Thane smirked. Maybe we ask them nicely to turn around. Offer them a coupon to the Milky Way's best tourist spots. Harlan glared, but Thane didn't much care. Fear was the flavor of the day, and everyone was getting a taste. We could prepare, Dahlia suggested, her voice cutting through the tension. There must be something, defense systems, alliances with Earth, anything. Thane shrugged. Sure, we could try that, but who wants to live forever anyway? Not me, Vex muttered, rubbing her temples. This colony can barely keep its lights on without a meltdown. Then we better hope the aliens are as dysfunctional as we are, Thane said, a grim smile tugging at his lips. Maybe they'll crash land too. We need a plan, Harlan insisted, his voice rising. And quickly. Plans are good, Thane agreed, standing. But we also need to remember one thing, we're all that's standing between them and Earth. So let's not screw this up more than we already have. Optimism, Thane, Dahlia asked, arching an eyebrow. Not optimism, Thane corrected, heading for the door. Just reality, and reality is a miserable bastard. The meeting adjourned, leaving Thane to mull over the grim news in the solitude of his lab. There was a comfort in solitude, in the hum of machinery and the cold, hard facts of science. But even science couldn't save them if the council didn't get its act together. Thane sat back, staring at the lunar landscape outside his viewport. A barren expanse, pockmarked and lifeless, much like their odds of survival. Well, they always said life was a gamble. Too bad the house always wins. Just as he was about to delve back into his data, the door hissed open and Dahlia slipped in, closing it quietly behind her. You think they'll act? She asked, a hint of hope coloring her words. Thane laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. Act, Dahlia, they couldn't act their way out of a paper bag if their lives depended on it. But they do, she said softly. Our lives depend on it. I know, Thane replied, his tone serious for once. That's what makes this so damn funny, she chuckled, the sound laced with a shared understanding of the absurdity of it all. You always did have a twisted sense of humor. Necessary trait living here, Thane said, gesturing at the moon outside like it was a bad roommate. The best comedy's always about pain, right? Dahlia nodded, her expression softening. Well, then here's to hoping we don't become the punchline. Cheers to that, Thane agreed, raising an imaginary glass. But I wouldn't hold my breath if I were you. Thane Kaler was nursing his third cup of what the colony generously referred to as coffee when Mira Solara burst into his lab like a solar flare on legs. She came in swinging a datapad and a scowl that could melt titanium. Mira was the kind of engineer who could fix anything with a roll of duct tape and a scathing remark. You look like you've been run over by a lunar rover, she announced with zero sympathy, eyeing Thane's unkempt state. Her jumpsuit bore the insignia of the engineering corps, a wrench crossed with a lightning bolt because apparently subtlety was overrated. That's the look I'm going for, Thane said, raising his mug in a mock toast. What can I do for Celine's answer to Apollo? She dropped her datapad on the desk, causing a small avalanche of junk to clatter to the floor. I heard your little presentation at the council meeting. Quite the horror show. Got any more of those nightmares to share? Plenty, Thane replied, rubbing the back of his neck. But they're not the kind that end with waking up. Why, interested in some light bedtime reading? Mira snorted, crossing her arms. I didn't come here for a front row seat to doom. I came to help. I believe you're onto something. Thane blinked, genuinely taken aback. You believe me? Don't act so surprised, Mira said dryly. It's not like I have anything better to do than prevent an alien invasion. He chuckled, a short bark of laughter. That's the spirit. So where do we start? She leaned over the table, scrolling through schematics and data streams. First thing, we need to talk defense. The colonies got some outdated turrets that wouldn't scare off a stubborn pigeon, let alone a space fleet. Tell me about it, Thane muttered. They were new when my grandfather was still losing his baby teeth. Yeah, well, I might have a few tricks up my sleeve, Mira said, her grin a flash of wicked confidence. Thane raised an eyebrow. Tricks that won't end with the dome imploding. Only on a bad day, she replied, shooting him a wink. I've got designs for a new defense system. It's untested, but unless you want to stand on the surface and throw rocks at them, it's our best shot. Rocks are tempting, Thane said, scratching his chin. But your plan sounds less suicidal. What do you need? Parts. A miracle. And possibly a bottle of whiskey, Mira listed off, counting on her fingers. Priority things first. Always whiskey, Thane agreed. But the council's not exactly overflowing with resources. Mira shrugged, unfazed by the challenge. Then we'll have to get creative. There's a graveyard of old tech we can scavenge, and I've got a few favors I can call in. Calling in favors in this place, Thane said. That's like asking a shark to share its lunch. Good thing I bite back, Mira replied, already pulling a list of potential donors on her pad. You just keep the council distracted with your existential dread. I'll handle the hardware. Thane watched her work, a strange mix of hope and dread swirling in his chest. You know, if this actually works, I'll owe you a drink. A real one. Mira flashed him a grin over her shoulder. I'll hold you to that. But first, let's make sure we live long enough to regret it. As Mira left to rally her forces, Thane couldn't help but admire her audacity. Maybe, just maybe, they had a shot at this. The council chamber was a powder keg of tension, with councilors bickering over budgets and action plans like children squabbling over toys. Thane sat in the back, arms crossed, watching the chaos unfold. It was a circus, and he'd seen enough clowns for one day. Dahlia sidled up next to him, her expression somewhere between amused and exasperated. Well, isn't this a charming cluster of ineptitude? It's like watching a bunch of headless chickens trying to organize a parade, Thane said, shaking his head. How's your optimism holding up? I've downgraded from we'll be fine to we might not die horribly, she replied, scanning the room. What's Mira up to? Engineering miracles, or at least attempting to, Thane said. She's got ideas for upgrading our defenses. Now we just need to convince this lot to back them. Dahlia gave a small nod. If anyone can make them see sense, it's her. But if she fails, I've got a plan B. Let me guess, Thane said. It involves running and screaming. Very loudly, Dahlia confirmed, smirking. What about you? Got any bright ideas? Well, I'd suggest we throw Harlan out there as a peace offering, but I doubt he'd do much more than annoy them to death, Thane mused. Tempting, Dahlia agreed, her smile wicked. But we might need him to annoy them here. Counselor Harlan, as if on cue, stood at the front of the room trying to wrestle control of the meeting. We must remain calm and assess our options rationally, he droned, clearly struggling to believe his own words. Thane leaned over to Dahlia. Calm is the last thing we need. A bit of panic might actually get things moving, as long as it's organized panic, Dahlia quipped. Finally, Harlan pointed a bony finger toward Thane. Kaler, you brought this to our attention. What exactly is your plan? Thane stood, feeling the weight of the room's scrutiny. Our plan is simple. We prepare. We upgrade our defenses. We scavenge, we build, and we make sure that when they get here, they're the ones who regret crashing our party. And how do you propose we do that with our limited resources? Vex challenged, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. We get creative. Mira's leading an effort to retrofit our turrets. She's got designs that could work if we back her, Thane explained, trying to sound more confident than he felt. And if they don't work, Harlan pressed. Then we prepare Plan B, Thane said, glancing at Dahlia. Running, very fast. A ripple of uneasy laughter swept through the counselors. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Are we really going to wager our survival on this? Vex asked, her skepticism palpable. Thane looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes. We've got two choices. Do nothing and hope for a miracle, or take a chance on something that might just save our asses. Which one sounds better to you? Silence stretched across the room, heavy and tense. Then slowly, reluctantly, heads began to nod. All right, Kaler, Harlan conceded, sounding like he'd just swallowed a lemon. You and Mira do what you can. But I expect results. Thane nodded, grateful for the small victory. You won't be disappointed, Harlan. Well, you might be, but at least you'll be alive to complain about it. The meeting adjourned with the council still divided, but with a faint, flickering hope that something might be salvaged from the impending disaster. Thane returned to his lab, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like a lead cloak. As the days bled into each other, Mira worked tirelessly with her team, transforming obsolete tech into something that might actually stand a chance against the aliens. Thane split his time between providing support and running communications with Earth, a task akin to screaming into a void, given the bureaucratic sludge they were mired in. "Any word from Earth?" Mira asked one evening, wiping sweat from her brow as she took a break from welding. "Nothing useful," Thane replied, shuffling through the endless stream of messages. "Just the usual platitudes about monitoring the situation and keeping us in their thoughts." "Thoughts aren't going to stop a plasma cannon," Mira groused, tossing her welding mask onto the workbench. "What about Dahlia?" "How's she holding up?" "Optimistic as ever," Thane said with a wry smile. "She's managed to keep morale from hitting rock bottom, which is more than I can say for most of us." "That's her superpower," Mira said, stretching her arms. "You know, I've been thinking." "Always a dangerous start," Thane teased. Mira ignored him, her expression thoughtful. "What if this invasion isn't just a threat but an opportunity?" Thane frowned, leaning back in his chair. "Opportunity for what, exactly?" "To get ourselves obliterated." "To prove ourselves," Mira said, her eyes alight with a fiery determination. "To show that when it comes down to it, we can handle whatever the universe throws at us. Or we could just end up as a footnote in some alien history book," Thane pointed out. "Or that," Mira admitted, grinning. "But if we're going to go down, might as well go down swinging, right?" He couldn't argue with that logic, skewed though it was. "You're a glutton for punishment, Mira." "Comes with the territory," she shot back, picking up her tools. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to make sure these turrets don't blow up in our faces." Thane watched her return to work, feeling a strange mix of admiration and exasperation. Mira's relentless drive was infectious, and for the first time in a long while, Thane allowed himself a glimmer of hope. Maybe they could pull this off. Back in his lab, Thane sat at his desk, staring out at the cracked viewport. The desolate lunar landscape stretched out before him, a stark reminder of the cold, unforgiving universe they inhabited. He found himself wondering if the universe had a cosmic sense of humor, because if it did, they were living proof. As he sifted through data, a notification blinked on his screen, an incoming message from Earth. He tapped it open, scanning the contents with weary eyes. "Good news?" Dahlia asked, poking her head in as if she could sense whenever he was about to lose his mind. Thane snorted. "Depends on your definition of good. Earth finally decided to send a couple of supply ships our way. They should reach us in time to see the fireworks." "Better late than never," she said, ambling in and plopping down in the chair across from him. "What about Mira's progress?" "She's a miracle worker," Thane said. "But a miracle's not going to cut it alone. We need everything we can get." Dahlia nodded, her expression serious. "Then let's make sure we're ready." "This rock might be a dump, but it's our dump." Thane chuckled, feeling the weight on his shoulders lighten just a fraction. "You know, Dahlia, if I didn't know any better, I'd say you're starting to sound like an optimist." "Don't spread it around," she warned, her grin playful. "But you might just be rubbing off on me." "God help you," Thane said, shaking his head. "Let's just hope we live to regret it." With Dahlia's irrepressible spirit and Mira's engineering genius, Thane began to think that maybe, just maybe, they stood a chance. But as he looked out at the endless void of space, he knew that whatever happened next, it would be the fight of their lives. And if they went down, they'd make damn sure the universe remembered who sent them there. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a flickering datapad screen, the usual feed of banal greetings from Earth replaced with static and gibberish. Thane squinted at it, as if by sheer will he could force it to make sense. Either their communications team started writing poetry, or something's gone very wrong. Mira glanced over from her bench, where she was elbow-deep in the guts of a turret control panel. Well, color me surprised. Earth dropping the ball, never saw that coming. Looks like the aliens decided to start the party early by knocking out our satellite networks, Thane muttered, running his fingers through his already unruly hair. Isn't that considerate of them? Mira snorted, a wrench in one hand and a grin on her face. Yeah, real considerate. Maybe they'll send us a thank you note next. The council chamber was in full swing by the time Thane arrived, the place buzzing with the kind of controlled chaos that was only a few steps removed from outright panic. Harlan was trying to keep order, but it was like herding cats with a megaphone. In short, a complete waste of energy. "Attention, everyone," Harlan shouted over the din, his voice barely rising above the noise. "We need to remain calm and—" "Isn't that what you said last time?" Vex interrupted, arms crossed and clearly not amused. "Look where that got us." Thane slipped in beside Dahlia, who was watching the spectacle with the sort of bemusement you usually reserved for watching a toddler try to put a square peg in a round hole. "How's your we might not die horribly vibe holding up?" Thane asked, leaning closer. "Somewhere between impending doom and we're all screwed," Dahlia replied, her smile tight. "Nice to see the councils reacting with their usual efficiency." "Efficiency's a strong word," Thane said. "More like paralysis." Harlan finally managed to regain some semblance of order, his face flushed with the effort. "We have confirmation that the aliens have launched an attack on our satellite networks. Our communications with Earth are compromised." "Compromised?" someone barked out. "They're about as useful as a solar-powered flashlight at midnight. We need alternatives," Harlan continued, ignoring the heckler. "Suggestions," Vex's voice cut through the murmurs. "We need to prepare for an attack here." "If they've hit Earth, we're next," agreed, Thane said, standing up. "Which is why we need to act, not debate. I've got a proposition." Dahlia raised an eyebrow. "And here I thought you lived for these debates." "Only when I'm winning," Thane replied dryly. "Now I suggest we form a team, not just any team but the best we've got. Engineers, scientists, anyone who's got a brain cell to spare. We innovate, we test, we prepare for whatever they throw at us." "And where do you propose we find these people, Kaler?" Vex challenged, still the ever-present thorn in his side. Thane shrugged. "Right here. We've got talent sitting around twiddling their thumbs while we argue over budgets. Let's put them to use." Harlan nodded, albeit reluctantly. "All right, Thane, you've got your team, but I expect results." "Fast?" "Don't worry, Harlan," Thane replied, smirking. "If I fail, I promise you'll be the first to know." Back in the workshop, Thane and Mira got to work assembling their ragtag team. It was a motley crew, each member more eccentric than the last, but if they were going to survive, it was going to be on the backs of the unlikely and the undisciplined. First on their list was Gareth, a slender man with the look of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. He was a whiz with software, though, and in space, that was worth its weight in unobtainium. "Gareth," Thane said, catching him between tasks, "feel like doing something a bit more exciting than recalibrating coffee dispensers." "Depends on what you call exciting," Gareth replied, his tone so dry it could have started a fire. Mira chimed in. "We need someone who can make old tech do new tricks." "You game?" Gareth sighed, the kind of sigh that carried centuries of disappointment. "Guess it's better than listening to Counselor Harlan's speeches." "That's the spirit," Thane said, clapping him on the back. Next, there was Etta, a former pilot with nerves of steel and a mouth like a laser cutter. Her task was to whip their sorry excuse for a transport fleet into shape. "Think you can handle it?" Thane asked, knowing full well the answer. Etta snorted, flipping her hair out of her eyes. "If I can fly a rust bucket through an asteroid field, I can handle this." Mira nodded, approving. "Good, because we're going to need every edge we can get." With the team cobbled together, Thane and Mira set about divvying up the work. It was a daunting task, one that would require all their collective brilliance and a fair bit of luck. "You ever get the feeling we're in over our heads?" Thane asked, looking over the plans Mira had sketched out on her datapad. "Constantly," she replied, her eyes scanning the schematics. "But it's not like we've got a choice." "Fair point." "What's the worst that could happen?" "Don't ask that," Mira warned. or the universe might take it as a challenge. As the days passed, the colony transformed into a hive of activity. The team worked tirelessly, sleeping in shifts, living off the dubious sustenance of colony, coffee, and determination. Thane found himself juggling more roles than he cared to count. Between organizing efforts and keeping the council from imploding, he barely had time to breathe, let alone worry about the aliens hovering just out of reach. "So, how are things looking?" Dahlia asked one evening, catching him on a rare break. "We're making progress," Thane said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Mira's got the turrets online, Edda's been whipping our shuttles into shape, and Gareth." "Well, Gareth's doing something, I'm just not sure what. I'll take something over nothing any day," Dahlia replied, her optimism a small ray of light in the gloom. "And you, how's the morale holding?" "Like a cat on a hot tin roof," Dahlia quipped. "But we're managing, people still have hope, and that's something." "Hope's a dangerous thing," Thane mused. "Yeah, but it's all we've got. Besides, I hear it's what's for breakfast." "Better than the gruel they serve in the mess," Thane laughed, though it was more of a reflex than genuine amusement. That night, Thane found himself back at the viewport, staring out into the void. The cracked glass cast strange shadows across his face, a fitting metaphor for their situation. They were on the brink of disaster, teetering on the edge of oblivion, and somehow they had to find a way to claw their way back. "You know," he said to the empty room, "if we survive this, I might just take up farming. Something peaceful, where the worst thing I have to worry about is a stubborn weed." The universe, ever the opportunist, chose that moment to remind him just how fragile their existence was. A low rumble shook the structure, a subtle but jarring reminder that the aliens weren't going to wait for them to get their act together. Mira burst into the lab, her face flushed with urgency. "Thane, we've got a problem." "Just one?" he quipped, though his heart sank at her expression. "The satellites are down, but our sensors picked up something," she explained, her voice taut with tension. "Looks like they've sent a scout ship our way." "Well, isn't that just perfect?" Thane muttered, his mind racing. "How long do we have?" "Not long enough," Mira replied, handing him her datapad. "But longer than we'd have without the turrets." Thane scanned the readouts, feeling the cold tendrils of fear coiling in his gut. "Looks like we get to test our defenses sooner than expected." "Always nice to have a deadline," Mira said, her smile grim. "So, what's the plan, boss?" He looked at her, seeing in her eyes the same determination that kept him going. "We hold them off, buy ourselves enough time to finish what we started, and hope like hell that Earth pulls through on their end." As Mira left to rally the team, Thane allowed himself a moment to gather his thoughts. The council was in disarray, the colony was under threat, and yet, against all logic, they had a chance. Perhaps they were fools to think they could stand against an alien force, but they'd be damned if they went down without a fight. And if the universe had a sense of humor, so did they. "All right, you old rock," Thane whispered to the moon beneath his feet. "Let's see if you've got any miracles left." Thane eyeballed the flickering screen of his datapad with the kind of disdain usually reserved for cockroaches and uninvited telemarketers. The damn thing had a mind of its own, displaying a chaotic jumble of data and gibberish. It was like trying to decipher an alien's grocery list written in chicken scratch. "Can't even get a bloody signal, and we're supposed to save the colony," he muttered, running a hand through his perpetually unruly hair. Mira, elbows deep in the guts of a turret control panel, shot him a look over her shoulder. "Hey, if it ain't sparkin' or smellin' like roasted circuits, was it really science?" She shoved a twisted mess of wires back into the panel and gave it a solid whack. The thing hummed to life, albeit reluctantly. "See, just needed a bit of encouragement. If only everything responded to violence," Thane said dryly. "We'd be having tea with the aliens by now." Outside, the colony of Selene's cradle was teetering on the edge, much like a drunk on a tightrope. The council had held yet another emergency meeting, during which Harlan had valiantly tried to maintain order. It was like watching someone try to juggle flaming torches while riding a unicycle over a pit of hangry alligators. not pretty. Thane, ever the optimist, had concocted a plan that might just keep them alive long enough to witness the next spectacular failure. The aliens, it seemed, had a penchant for ruining the best-laid plans, much like a cat that couldn't resist knocking things off the shelf just to watch them break. He glanced over at the team they had managed to scrape together. Gareth was hunched over a console, his fingers dancing across the keys like a pianist at a death metal concert. Etta was supervising the haphazard upgrade of their shuttles, barking orders with the gusto of a drill sergeant who'd had one too many cups of decaf. It was a sight to behold, like watching a flock of chickens try to build a spaceship. "How long do you reckon before they realize we're just making this up as we go along?" Thane asked Mira, who was now flicking through her own datapad, the screen reflecting in her eyes like a tiny, judgmental mirror. "Hopefully long enough for us to actually make it up," she replied, not looking up. "I've seen more cohesive plans from children trying to build a fort out of couch cushions. So, we improvise. What's the worst that could happen?" Thane said, shrugging. The universe seemed to snicker in response. The walls around them vibrated with a distant thud, the kind of sound that suggested something very large and very unfriendly was knocking on their front door. Mira's gaze snapped to his, her expression grim. "Don't tempt fate, Thane, it loves a challenge." "Right, let's just focus on the task at hand," Thane said. "Speaking of which, how goes the biotechnological defenses?" Mira grunted, which from her was practically a sonnet of praise. "We're making progress, slowly, like two snails racing up a hill of molasses. Better than nothing. How's the morale?" "Low, like a limbo champion on their best day," she replied. "But Dahlia's keeping them from going completely off the deep end, though I think I saw her trying to convince someone that optimism isn't a terminal condition." Thane snorted. Knowing this place, it might as well be. They were interrupted by Etta, who stormed in with the kind of energy that suggested she could punch a hole through a bulkhead if the mood struck her. "We've got a rat." "A rat?" Thane echoed, raising an eyebrow. "A saboteur," she clarified, arms crossed. "Someone's been tinkering with the shuttle systems. I suspect they are either stupid, suicidal, or both." "Probably both," Thane said. "Any idea who?" "Not yet. But if I find them, they'll be volunteering for an unscheduled spacewalk," Etta vowed, her glare promising painful repercussions. Mira sighed, rubbing her temples. "That's just what we need. Internal sabotage to go with external threats. It's like a 2-for-1 disaster special." "We need to keep this quiet," Thane said, tone serious. "Panic's the last thing we need right now." "Agreed," Mira said, "but we can't exactly ignore it either." "I'll talk to Gareth," Thane decided. "See if he can track any anomalies in the system. If someone's messing with our tech, there'll be traces." "Good luck," Etta said. "And if you find the bastard, tell them I've got a nice, cozy cell waiting for them." Thane nodded and made his way to Gareth's corner of the chaos. "Got a minute, Gareth?" Gareth looked up, his eyes half hidden behind a pair of comically large goggles. "For you, Thane, always. Need me to code the meaning of life for you, or just something mundane?" "Mundane, I'm afraid," Thane replied. "We've got a saboteur on our hands. Think you can track any unusual activity in the system?" Gareth's fingers paused over the keyboard. "Saboteur, huh? Can't say I'm surprised. This place is a pressure cooker waiting to blow, but sure, I can take a look." "Appreciate it," Thane said. "Anything you find, keep it on the down low." Gareth nodded, already lost in the digital sea of ones and zeros. "You got it." And Thane, "Yeah, don't get your hopes up. People are more predictable than they think, but that doesn't mean they are easy to catch." Thane gave a wry smile. "Story of my life, Gareth." He returned to Mira's side, who was watching the team with the kind of hawk-like intensity that suggested she'd caught the scent of incompetence and wasn't about to let it slide. "Think you can handle this?" Thane asked, though he already knew the answer. "With one hand tied behind my back," she replied, confidence lining her words like steel. "We're going to make this happen, Thane, even if it kills us." "Let's aim for even if it doesn't," he said with a smirk. "But your optimism's noted." As the Iors dragged on, the tension in the air thickened like a simmering soup ready to boil over. The colony's fragile peace was a thread stretched to the breaking point, each new crisis a weight threatening to snap it in two. "So, think we'll survive the night?" Dahlia asked, joining Thane at the cracked viewport where he once again sought solace in the stars. "It's a 50-50 shot," Thane said, not sugarcoating the odds. "But knowing our luck, something's bound to go wrong." "Ever the optimist, Kaler," Dahlia said, a teasing lilt in her voice. "But hey, at least if we go out, we'll do it with style." "Style, huh?" Thane chuckled. "If by style you mean in a blaze of incompetence, then yeah, we're set." The timbre of the colony shifted abruptly, the lights flickering as if uncertain whether to stay on or give up completely. It was a fitting metaphor for their current predicament. Mira's voice crackled over the comms, breaking the uneasy silence. "Thane, you might want to come to the lab. We've got company." "I'm on my way," Thane replied, heading out with Dahlia in tow. When they arrived, the atmosphere was thick with urgency. Mira stood over a console, her eyes fixed on the myriad of screens displaying an array of information that looked more like abstract art than anything useful. "Scout ships closing in," she informed them. "They're testing our defenses, looking for weaknesses." "Wonderful," Thane said. "And here I thought today couldn't get any better." "Think they'll find anything?" Dahlia asked, her tone light but her expression serious. "Not if I can help it," Mira snapped, her fingers dancing over the controls. "I've got the turrets aligning now. If they want a fight, we'll give them one." "Speaking of fights," Thane said, turning to Dahlia, "any sign of our friendly neighborhood saboteur?" She shook her head. "Not yet. But I've got a feeling they won't stay hidden for long, not with things heating up like this." As if on cue, the lights flickered again. The room plunged into momentary darkness before the emergency lights kicked in, casting everything in a sickly red glow. "Great," Thane muttered. "Just what we need. A power outage in the middle of an alien invasion." Mira was already on it, her voice rising above the chaos. "Gareth, status on the systems. Working on it," came the reply, tinged with frustration. "This isn't just a glitch, someone's messing with us." "The saboteur?" Dahlia asked. "Probably," Gareth said, "but I'll be damned if I let them win." "Good," Thane said, determination in his voice. "Because we're not going down without a fight." The colony shuddered again as the scout ship made another pass, testing their resolve. But this time the turrets responded, a cascade of bright energy lancing out into the void, a symphony of defiance against the darkness. "Status," Thane barked, adrenaline sharpening his focus. "They're retreating for now," Mira said, visibly relieved. "But they'll be back. They always come back." Thane nodded, the brief victory a balm on their frazzled nerves. "Then we keep pushing forward. We've got to finish these defenses before they decide to get serious." "And the saboteur?" Etta asked, rejoining them, her expression a storm cloud of contained fury. "We find them," Thane said, his voice a low growl. "And we make sure they know exactly what we think of their little games." With renewed energy the team dispersed, each member charged with a mission, a purpose. They would not go quietly into the void. Not today. Thane watched them go, a motley crew of misfits and outcasts, each one carrying the weight of the colony on their shoulders. Against all odds they become something more, a family, bound by shared struggle and an unyielding spirit. "Think we'll make it?" Mira asked, her voice soft as the chaos subsided. Thane considered the question, the enormity of it pressing down on him like gravity. "I think we'll give them hell trying." He turned back to the viewport, the stars cold and distant, indifferent to their plight. But somewhere out there, beyond the darkness, lay the hope of survival, a future they would fight tooth and nail to secure. Because in the end, that was what it meant to be human, to face the void with a grin, to laugh in the face of chaos, and to persist no matter the odds. Thane Kaler was beginning to understand why the word lunatic had lunar in it. Selene's cradle, their charming little colony on the moon, was teetering on the brink of a very literal lunar disaster. With Earth's major cities being besieged by aliens and comms severed like a bad haircut, it was officially the darkest hour for humanity. And as usual, the only light at the end of their tunnel was probably an alien scout ship, ready to blast them back to the Stone Age. The council chamber was buzzing with an energy that could only be described as a cocktail of caffeine, fear, and that peculiar brand of optimism that comes right before everything goes to hell. Thane stood at the head of the room trying desperately to exude leadership while his datapad continued its descent into madness. It had now resorted to flashing random insults at him. He was fairly certain the thing had achieved sentience just to mock him. "All right, people, listen up," Thane shouted, trying to corral the chaos. "We've got two problems. One, Earth is under attack. Two, our communications are down. So basically, we're screwed. But let's focus on what we can handle, our own sorry asses." Dahlia, the ever-optimist, raised her hand like a schoolgirl eager to please. "Why do you think the aliens attacked just now? Probably tired of our cooking," Thane replied. "Or maybe they just hate us. Either way, they're here, and if our luck holds, they're sending us housewarming gifts in the form of plasma bombs." Mira Solara, their no-nonsense engineer, snorted. "Maybe it's all a misunderstanding, like they think we're the pest infestation." She was busy hammering the turret control panel with a wrench, trying to coax it into working order through sheer force of personality and brute strength. "Could be worse," Thane said. "We could actually be on Earth right now, getting our asses handed to us by a bunch of interstellar tourists with bad manners." "Don't tempt fate, Thane," Dahlia warned. "She loves a challenge." "Well, she's not the only one," he muttered, turning his attention to the matter at hand. "Gareth, any progress on finding our dear saboteur?" Gareth was buried in his console, fingers gliding over the keys with the grace of a concert pianist, if said pianist also happened to be high on adrenaline and possibly coffee. "I've narrowed it down to a few suspects," he said, without looking up. "Though considering our track record, they might just be trying to fix things and screwing it up." "Let's hope that's the case," Thane said. "But keep digging." The door hissed open and Etta stormed in, her presence like a bolt of lightning ready to strike. "We've got a problem," she announced, which was about as surprising as rain in a storm. "Just one?" Thane asked, raising an eyebrow. "I'm impressed. Shuttle systems have been tampered with," Etta continued, ignoring him. "Someone's been feeding the aliens our defense protocols." There was a collective intake of breath, the room going as silent as a graveyard at midnight. Even the datapad seemed to pause its abuse to let the moment sink in. "Well, shit," Mira declared, ever eloquent. "A traitor in our midst." "Just when I thought things were getting predictable." "Dahlia," Thane began, "gather the folks. We need everyone calm and not looking to play interstellar witch hunt." "On it," Dahlia said, already moving, her optimism a beacon, or maybe just an irritating reminder that hope was still a thing. Meanwhile, Thane turned to Mira. "What are the chances you can get those turrets working without turning them into oversized paperweights?" "Better than your chances of getting a new datapad," she shot back before adding, "I'll make it work or die trying." "Please don't die," Thane said. "We need you alive and kicking metal." Mira smirked, a rare and fleeting thing. "I'll do my best." As she stalked off, tools in hand, Thane turned to Gareth. "You find anything, make sure to loop Etta in. If there's a snake in our garden, I want her to stomp it." The atmosphere in the colony was now electric, crackling with tension and the tangible weight of impending doom. It was like being on the Titanic if the Titanic had been a tin can slapped on the moon's surface. Thane found himself back at the viewport, staring out at the stars. They were as indifferent as ever, twinkling like they were in on the whole cosmic joke. He wondered if some alien somewhere was laughing at them, or if they were just another line in the universe's long list of screw-ups. Dahlia sidled up next to him, a steaming mug in hand. "Coffee," she offered, the air quotes around the word almost visible. "Sure," he said, taking the mug and downing it in one go. It tasted like tar mixed with regret. "Delicious, as always." "Morale's holding," Dahlia said, her expression thoughtful. "Barely. People are scared, but they are ready to fight." "Good," Thane said, "because we might not have a choice." Just then the colony shuddered again, a distant rumble echoing through the walls. Another scout ship, or maybe just the universe's way of reminding them how small they really were. Mira's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Turrets are online, boss, ready to give our visitors a warm welcome." "About time," Thane replied. "Make sure it's a memorable one." "Already planning the fireworks display," she said, her voice crackling with mischief. Thane returned to the council chamber, where Edda was rallying the troops like a commander readying for battle. Her no-nonsense approach was exactly what they needed, a reminder that they still had teeth and they weren't afraid to use them. "Listen up," Thane called, drawing everyone's attention. "I don't need to tell you what's at stake. The bastards are at our door and they've got friends in here, but we're not rolling over. Not today. We stand our ground and we fight back." There were nods and murmurs of agreement, a sense of unity forming amidst the chaos. It was grim, sure, but it was theirs, and they'd be damned if they let anyone take it from them. Gareth was at his console, fingers dancing like a magician weaving a spell. "I've got a lead," he announced, his voice a whisper among the chaos. "It's not much, but it's something." "Good," Thane said. "Follow it." "Already on it," Gareth replied, his focus unwavering. The scouts were closing in, their ships like dark shadows against the moon's surface. But this time, Selene's cradle was ready. The turrets blazed to life, a cacophony of light and sound that filled the void with defiance. As the battle raged, Thane found himself caught in the adrenaline-fueled storm, the weight of leadership heavy on his shoulders. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, a reminder of what it meant to be alive, to fight, to struggle, to persist against all odds. "Think we'll make it?" Mira asked, her voice barely audible over the din. Thane didn't have an answer, not one that wouldn't sound trite. But then again, they weren't here for guarantees. They were here to fight, and if that meant staring down the abyss and telling it to shove off, then so be it. "Yeah," he said finally, "we'll make it, one way or another." The battle wore on, the colony's defenses holding firm against the relentless assault. But Thane knew it was only a matter of time before the aliens tried something new, something unexpected. And that was when it happened. A sudden shift in the scout ship's formation, a movement that spoke of desperation and cunning in equal measure. They were changing tactics, adapting, evolving. "Brace yourselves," Edda shouted, her voice a clarion call to arms. The aliens pressed their advantage, a relentless assault that tested every inch of Selene's cradle. But the colony held, its people fueled by a determination that bordered on insanity. In the midst of the chaos, Thane felt a strange sense of calm. It was the kind of clarity that came when everything was on the line, when the stakes were as high as they could get. It was terrifying, yes, but it was also exhilarating. A reminder that they were alive, that they were fighting, that they were human. And that, in the end, might just be enough. As the last of the scout ships retreated, Thane turned to his team, a ragtag bunch of misfits who had somehow managed to pull off the impossible. "Well," he said, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "That was fun." Mira laughed, a sound like metal meeting metal. "Let's never do it again." "Agreed," Dahlia said, her voice light despite the weight of their victory. "Once is enough." And as the dust settled and the colony's defenses held, Thane knew that they had survived another day. The war wasn't over, far from it. But they had taken a stand, and that was something. Because in the end, it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about standing your ground, about fighting back, about refusing to give up even when the odds were stacked against you. And that was something worth fighting for. Thane Kaler stood in the council chamber that had seen more disasters than a reality show marathon. The room buzzed with a nervous energy, the kind that made people fidget with buttons and check their non-existent watches. He was surrounded by the usual suspects: Mira Solara, with her toolkit that looked like it had been through a war, Dahlia Jax, the sunbeam that had somehow escaped from the solar system, and Gareth, the wizard who managed to coax music from machines that hated them. "We need a new plan," Thane declared, like a teacher addressing a bunch of unruly kids about to flunk their exams. "The old ways aren't cutting it." And before anyone suggests it, no, we can't just slap a kick-me sign on the aliens and hope for the best. Shame, Mira said, her wrench twirling in her fingers like it was part of her. That was Plan B. Plan C is to moon them, Gareth added, not looking up from his console. We are on the moon, after all. Dahlia grinned, her eyes shining with that irritating optimism that made Thane want to lock her in a room with a motivational speaker. What about using the lunar resources? We've got plenty of rock and dust, and last I checked, rocks don't need oxygen. Thane nodded. Exactly. If we're going to survive, we need to get creative. Which means biopunk defense systems made from moon dirt and whatever else we can scrounge up. Biopunk? Mira raised an eyebrow, a grin playing at the corners of her mouth. Sounds messy. Messy is our middle name, Thane countered. Besides, what do we have to lose? Besides our lives, of course. Not like I'm using mine for anything useful, Gareth muttered, still pounding away at his console. Except trying to stop us from being space dust. Priority one is getting communications back online, Thane continued, ignoring Gareth's snark. If we can reach Earth, maybe we can coordinate a defense, or at the very least say goodbye. Such a romantic, Dahlia teased. But you're right. If we can make contact, maybe Earth can send us a care package. Preferably one that doesn't explode. Mira leaned against the wall, tapping her wrench rhythmically. All right, boss, what's the plan then? How do we turn moon rocks into something more than a really bad soup? Thane smirked. We call it the lunar lattice. A defense grid made from the moon itself, woven into a network that can detect, defend, and if we're lucky, knock those alien bastards on their asses. Gareth finally stopped typing, looking up with a hint of intrigue. Sounds ambitious and potentially explosive. Ambitious and explosive, Thane agreed. My two favorite adjectives. Let's not blow ourselves up before we even get it started, Dahlia chimed in. I'd rather not become a human firework. Then let's get to work, Thane said, feeling the room's energy shift from hopeless to hopeful, a much better flavor if you asked him. Mira, I need you to start on the lattice framework. Figure out how to integrate the turrets into it. Got it, Mira said, already moving toward the exit like a storm on legs. Dahlia, morale duty as usual. Make sure no one's trying to dig their own grave out there. On it, she replied with a cheerful salute that clashed with the grimness of their situation. And Gareth, Thane continued, we need eyes on everything. If the aliens sneeze, I want to know about it. Gareth nodded. I'll set up surveillance and maybe get us some music to die to. Perfect, Thane said. Let's make sure it's our choice if we go down. They dispersed, each carrying the weight of their tasks like a personal vendetta. Thane lingered a moment, feeling the gravity of leadership pushing down on him like a particularly heavy blanket. The kind that was more smothering than comforting. He found Mira in the makeshift lab, a place that looked like it had borrowed its aesthetic from a scrapyard. She was surrounded by parts and pieces, each more mismatched than the last. How's it going? He asked, sidling up next to her. Like trying to put a square peg in a round hole, Mira said, grunting as she forced a piece of metal into place. But that's never stopped me before. Good to hear, Thane replied. Because if we pull this off, maybe we can finally get some peace around here. Mira chuckled, a dry sound that always reminded him of sandpaper. Peace. You sure you're not getting your hopes up too high? Hopes for fools, he replied. But I've been a fool plenty of times before. Meanwhile, Dahlia was in the common area, organizing a game of who can pretend not to be terrified. It was a hit, mostly because the alternative was staring into the void and waiting for it to blink first. The colony felt different now, like a coiled spring ready to snap, or maybe a bunch of rubber bands about to ping across the room. It was hard to tell which. Thane watched as the lattice took shape, a web of ingenuity and desperation wrapped in moonstone. It was ugly and beautiful in the way only something made from necessity could be. Think this'll work? Mira asked, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. It better, Thane said, because it's all we've got. They worked day and night, blending into a continuous cycle of effort and exhaustion. Each breakthrough was celebrated like a small victory, each setback cursed with the fervor of a sailor in a storm. Eventually, the comms were patched together with the kind of precision only a desperate engineer could muster. The trick now was getting someone on the other end to answer. "All right," Thane said, looking at the jury-rigged station that was their lifeline to Earth. Moment of truth. He hit the button, sending a signal sailing across the void, bouncing from rock to rock like a cosmic game of pinball. Static greeted them, a familiar and unwelcome guest. "Come on, you piece of junk," Gareth muttered under his breath as he adjusted the frequency, his fingers dancing over the console with an urgency that matched the situation. "Anything?" Mira asked, her voice tense. "Give it a second," Thane replied, though patience had never been his strong suit. The static crackled, faded, and then a voice cut through, as clear and shocking as a slap to the face. "This is Earth Command. Selene's Cradle, do you copy?" There was a collective intake of breath, a moment where hope and reality collided in a spectacular crash. "We hear you, Earth," Thane replied, trying to keep the relief out of his voice. "Glad to know someone's still kicking down there." "More or less," the voice replied, and Thane could almost hear the wry smile. "What's your status?" Thane glanced around at his team, who looked like they'd just been told they weren't about to be thrown into a meat grinder. "We're holding, but we could use some reinforcements, and maybe a pizza." "Reinforcements are in short supply," Earth Command said. "But we'll do what we can. What's your plan?" "The lunar lattice," Thane explained. "We're setting up a defense grid using local resources. Should give us a fighting chance." "Sounds ambitious," Earth Command replied, echoing Gareth's earlier sentiment. "But ambitious is all we've got." "Copy that," Thane said. "Anything you can send our way would be appreciated." "Ammo, parts, maybe some chocolate. We'll see what we can do," Earth Command replied, the static creeping back in. "Stay alive, Selene's Cradle. We're counting on you." The signal cut out, leaving them with the humming silence of the moon and the monumental task ahead. "Real confidence booster, that," Mira said, her voice like a dry martini. "They really know how to inspire." "Hey, at least they answered," Dahlia chimed in, ever the optimist. "That's more than I expected." "Right," Thane said, clapping his hands together. "Let's finish this setup. If we go down, let's make sure we go down swinging." With renewed energy, they returned to their tasks, the lattice growing piece by piece, a testament to human stubbornness and sheer bloody-mindedness. As they worked, Thane couldn't help but imagine the headlines. "Ragtag Moon Colony sticks it to aliens, using rocks and sheer grit." Probably wouldn't win them any awards, but it'd make for one hell of a story. Mira's team moved with purpose, their hands deftly weaving the lattice, connecting it to the turrets like some mad scientist's dream. It wasn't perfect, but then perfection was a luxury they couldn't afford. "Ready for a test run?" Mira asked, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the possible. "Fire it up," Thane replied, crossing his fingers behind his back. It was an old superstition, but old habits died hard, especially when death was a likely outcome. The lattice hummed to life, a low thrum that resonated through the colony like a heartbeat. The turrets aligned, their targeting systems synchronized with the grid. It was a dance of technology and desperation, a symphony of chaos mastered by a group that had no business succeeding. "Looks like it's working," Gareth said, sounding almost surprised. "Let's hope it holds," Thane said, watching the readouts with a mix of trepidation and awe. "Because I really don't want to be a footnote in the annals of cosmic failure. The aliens would be back, of that Thane was certain." But this time Selene's Cradle was ready. They had scraped together a defense from the lunar dust and the wreckage of their hopes, and damn if it didn't feel good to have something to show for it. "Think we've got a shot?" Mira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A shot's all we need," Thane replied. "Let them come. We'll give them a proper welcome." As the colony settled into a tense waiting game, Thane knew this was their turning point. They had taken control of their destiny, and for better or worse, they were in it together. In the silence that followed, punctuated only by the distant thrum of the lattice, Thane couldn't help but feel a flicker of something dangerously close to hope. If they survived this, it would be on their terms and maybe that was enough. For now, anyway. The lunar lattice had a personality, all right. It was the kind of contraption that looked like it might insult you under its breath just for kicks. But by some miracle, it was humming along nicely, ready to deliver a firm handshake of death to any alien brave, or stupid, enough to test it. Thane stood with Mira in the observation room, which was really just a fancy name for a cramped space with a cracked viewport. Out there was the cold, dead landscape of the moon, just begging for a bit of dramatic tension. "Ready to give this thing a whirl?" Thane asked, arms crossed like he was about to start a fight with reality itself. Mira grinned, a crooked, roguish smile that matched her. "Ready as I'll ever be." "I've got a date with some alien butt to kick." Dahlia popped her head in, seemingly unfazed by the fact they were mere moments from potential doom. "Hey, if we survive this, I'm claiming dibs on the next round of not coffee." "Deal," Thane said, unable to keep a smirk off his face. "But if this doesn't work, we might be having a long nap instead." "Sounds restful," Mira quipped. "But I'm not quite ready to bunk down just yet." Gareth, ever the pessimist wrapped in a thin layer of sarcasm, joined them, rubbing his temples as if trying to massage away the headache that was their lives. "Just remember, if this goes sideways, I told you so." Yeah, you're a prophet," Thane replied. "Now how about you help us make sure your prophecy doesn't come true?" Gareth rolled his eyes but moved to the console, fingers flying over the keys like he was conducting an orchestra of chaos. "Let's get this doomed show on the road." The lattice flared to life, lights blinking in a sequence that might have looked pretty if you ignored the life-or-death stakes. The turrets, those aging relics from a bygone era, whirred in unison, an iron chorus ready to unleash hell. "All right," Thane said, feeling the weight of the moment like a rock in his gut. "Here we go." As if on cue, the alien ships blinked into existence in the vacuum of space, their sleek forms cutting through the darkness. They moved with a kind of cocky arrogance like they owned the place. Which, to be fair, they probably thought they did. "Show started," Mira noted, as calm as if she were commenting on the weather. "Time to see if our science experiment holds up." The first volley of alien fire came in hot, lighting up the lunar dust in bursts that would have made a great fireworks display back on Earth. Except these were the kind of fireworks that could turn you into space debris. "Activate the grid," Thane barked, more out of instinct than any need to actually be heard. The lattice responded with a precision that was almost eerie. The moon itself seemed to ripple, the lattice drawing energy from the iron-rich soil, twisting it into a tangible defense. Turrets spat plasma, each shot finding its mark with uncanny accuracy. "Ha! Take that, you cosmic vultures," Mira shouted, practically vibrating with adrenaline. "Keep your pants on," Gareth muttered, though there was a hint of pride in his voice. "It's not over yet." The alien ships recoiled, clearly not expecting the greeting they'd received. They regrouped, darting back with movements that suggested either a tactical retreat or a regrouping for another attack. Either way, they were out of their element. "Looks like they're retreating," Dahlia said, almost disbelieving. "More like falling back to regroup," Thane countered, always the cynic. "They'll be back, probably with friends." But for now, the space was eerily quiet. The kind of quiet that gets under your skin and makes you wonder if the universe is holding its breath. "Guess the cockroaches found out we've got a can of Raid," Mira said, her tone reveling in the small victory. "Next step is ensuring this isn't just a temporary win," Thane reminded them, ever the responsible leader. "We need to reinforce the lattice, keep the gears greased." Gareth nodded, already lost in calculations. "If they've got brains, they'll be back with reinforcements. We're gonna need more than just spit and duct tape next time." "Suggestions?" Thane asked, looking around at his team. They weren't much to look at, but they were his, and they'd kept him alive long enough to appreciate what that meant. "More turrets," Mira said immediately. "We need to turn this place into a hedgehog of death. And we need to get the comms with Earth stable," Gareth added. "Our victory here is useless if the folks back home get wiped out." "Right," Thane agreed. "Dahlia, head to the comm station. See if Earth Command has anything useful to share." "On it," she said, already bouncing out the door like someone who didn't know the meaning of fear, or maybe just didn't let it slow her down. Thane, meanwhile, took a moment to soak in the fact that they were still breathing, small victories and all. "All right, let's get to it. We've got moon rocks to polish and aliens to disappoint." They set to work, the quiet hum of the lattice providing an odd sort of background music. The colony was alive with the clatter of tools and the sound of people doing whatever it took to survive. It was almost comforting in a way. Dahlia, meanwhile, reached the comm station, still glowing from their recent victory. She adjusted the controls, sending out a signal that felt like tossing a message in a bottle into a very hostile ocean. The response was quick, a crackle of static followed by a familiar voice. "Celine's Cradle, Earth Command here. Heard you put up quite a show." Dahlia grinned. "You could say that. We kicked some alien ass back into orbit." Earth Command's voice took on a more serious tone. "Good to hear. We're rallying troops on the ground. Any intel you've got would be invaluable." "We'll send what we have," Dahlia promised. "And if you've got any spare parts or ammo lying around, we wouldn't say no." "We'll see what we can do," Earth Command replied with a hint of that dry chuckle. "Stay sharp, Cradle. The fight's far from over." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Dahlia said, signing off with a mock salute to the console. With communication re-established, the colony felt a renewed sense of purpose. Like they weren't just a bunch of misfits stuck on a moon, but part of something bigger, a cog in a machine that was finally starting to turn. Back in the makeshift lab, Mira and Gareth were deep in conversation, surrounded by a heap of tools that looked like they'd been through several wars. "If we reroute the power from the secondary grid, we can boost the turret capacity," Mira suggested, sketching diagrams in the air with her finger like an artist painting a masterpiece. "And pray it doesn't blow up in our faces," Gareth added with a skeptical grunt. "Whatever, worth a shot." Thane entered, looking at the scene with a small smile. "How are my favorite mad scientists doing?" "Currently not blowing up," Mira said. "So pretty good. Earth's sending what they can," Thane announced. "Might even throw in some chocolate if we're lucky." "Finally, some real luxury," Gareth sighed. "Now let's just hope we live long enough to enjoy it." "Let's focus on that part," Thane said, clapping Gareth on the shoulder with more confidence than he felt. Hours turned into days as the team worked tirelessly. The colony became a well-oiled machine, patched together with spit, determination, and more than a few curse words. It was a symphony of effort, a chaotic, disjointed cacophony that somehow kept them alive. The alien ships returned, just as Thane had predicted. But this time, the colony was ready. The lattice sang with power, turrets unleashing a barrage that turned the night into day. The moon itself seemed to shake with the force of their defiance. "Here they come again," Mira noted, almost gleefully. "Let's give them a welcome they won't forget." The alien fleet surged forward, but the lattice held steady, repelling the attack with a ferocity that surprised even its creators. The aliens, once so confident, now found themselves on the defensive. "Looks like they're getting the message," Dahlia said, her eyes glued to the readouts. "We might actually pull this off." "Don't jinx it," Gareth warned, though his fingers danced over the console with newfound purpose. "We've still got work to do." The battle raged on, the colony a beacon of resistance in the vast emptiness of space. As the Iors stretched to their breaking point, it became clear that the tide was turning. One by one, the alien ships peeled away, their formation breaking under the relentless assault. It was a sight that could have inspired a ballad if there'd been anyone left to write one. "Looks like we've got him on the run," Mira said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Did we just win?" Thane let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "For now, at least, but we've still got work to do." With Earth Command coordinating efforts on the ground, the combined human forces managed to push back the alien invaders. It wasn't easy, nothing worth doing ever was, but the tide had turned. The next few days were a blur of activity, filled with patching up wounds, counting losses, and planning for whatever came next. There was still work to be done, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like they were moving in the right direction. Thane stood at the viewport, gazing out at the stars that had watched over so much pain and struggle. Not bad for a bunch of misfits, eh? Mira joined him, her face a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. Not bad at all. Dahlia sidled up next to them, holding a steaming mug of whatever passed for coffee these days. Here's to proving the universe wrong. And here's to doing it again tomorrow, Thane said, raising an imaginary glass. They stood there in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but they'd bought themselves a little more time. And sometimes time was all you needed. As the colony settled into a new rhythm, Thane knew they'd face whatever came next with the same grit and determination that had gotten them this far. After all, if you could craft victory out of moon rocks, you could do just about anything. The aftermath of the alien retreat was a mess, and not the kind of mess a mop and a bucket could fix. No, this was the kind of mess that came with a side of existential dread and the stench of burnt circuits. Thane stood in the council chamber, staring at the cracked viewport, which had somehow managed to survive the onslaught. Maybe it had developed a sense of humor, too. "You know," he said, arms crossed, "I never thought I'd be grateful for a quiet moment where the only thing trying to kill us is the airlock." Mira, his partner in this interstellar circus, leaned against a console that had seen better days. "I don't know, Thane. I think the aliens deserve a bit of credit for their timing. Right when I was just getting used to our lunar lifestyle." Her eyes danced with that roguish smile, the one that said she wasn't quite ready to give up on the thrill of it all. "Still," she added, "it's nice to have a breather." Dahlia waltzed in, balancing a cup precariously. "Hey, who knew saving the world would be such a great workout? Feel like I've run a marathon without leaving the moon. Imagine the medals we'd get," Gareth chimed in from his console, still radiating that delightful mix of sarcasm and pessimism. For the event of surviving another day. Harlan tried to keep his composure, the self-appointed referee in this chaos. "All right, folks, let's not get too comfortable. We've still got a pile of alien debris to sweep up and a colony to keep from falling apart." Etta was next, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd seen it all and wasn't impressed. "I've got the engineering crew fixing up those turrets. They've proven they can still pack a punch or two. Hope they stick around long enough for the encore," Vex muttered, skepticism lacing his every word. "Reinforce them with more moon dirt, I guess." "Moon dirt and desperation," Mira said with a wink. "The secret ingredients to any successful defense system." Thane paced the chamber, a habit that suggested he was either thinking or just trying not to punch something. "Look, I know we're feeling pretty invincible right now, but let's not forget that we're dangling by a thread here. Communications are still spotty and Earth's got its own problems." "Speaking of which," Dahlia interjected, "Earth Command sent a message. It's patchy, but they're holding up. Could use a little less alien enthusiasm, though." As if on cue the lights flickered, a not-so-subtle reminder of their precarious situation. Mira groaned. "Ah, the ambience of a failing power grid really sets the mood." "Adds charm," Gareth deadpanned. "Like living in a haunted house, except the ghosts are just electrical shorts." A brief silence settled over them, the kind that comes after the punchline but before anyone dares to laugh, because laughing too soon felt like tempting fate. Thane broke the silence with a nod toward the viewport. "You know, looking out there," he said, gesturing to the expanse of stars, "makes you realize just how insignificant we are, terrifying and humbling all at once." "Oh, don't go soft on us, Thane," Mira teased. "We like you better as the grumpy cynic." Dahlia, ever the optimist, chimed in. "Hey, if we can keep kicking alien butt with what little we've got, maybe we're not so insignificant after all. Or maybe the aliens are just worse planners than we thought," Vex suggested, playing devil's advocate. "Either way, I'll take it." The discussion turned to practicalities, the kind that kept the colony running. Supplies were dwindling, repairs were needed, and morale was a fragile thing, easily inflated and easily punctured. Etta, with her drill sergeant demeanor, mapped out the work schedule. All right, everyone, let's get to it. Turret upgrades, system checks, and for the love of all that's holy, someone find where the hell all our spares have gone. Maybe the aliens took them, Gareth suggested. Stealing our spare parts to build a moon fortress of their own, Mira chuckled. If they try to copy this mess, they're welcome to it. The day stretched on, everyone busy with their tasks. The colony was a hive of activity, each person a cog in a machine that was barely holding together. It was the kind of organized chaos that felt almost comforting, like the universe had briefly forgotten to be a complete bastard. Thane took a moment to watch his team work, each of them performing their tasks with a weary but determined resolve. They might have been a ragtag group, but they were his ragtag group, and damn if they weren't doing their best to make the universe eat dirt. "Hey, Thane," Mira called, breaking him out of his reverie. "You think we'll ever get back to Earth? You know, if it's still there?" He looked at her, considering the question. "If it's not, then we'll just have to make this rock a little more livable. Get some flowers, maybe a decent espresso machine." "Now you're talking," Dahlia said, joining them. "I mean, who needs Earth when you've got endless moon dust and the thrilling possibility of suffocation every morning?" Thane shook his head, bemused. "I swear, if humor could fix our problems, we'd have repelled the entire alien fleet with a stand-up routine. Or at least made them die laughing," Gareth added, not missing a beat. As the day wound down, the council reconvened in the chamber that had become their de facto war room. Maps, plans, and datapads littered the table, a testament to their ongoing struggle against the cosmic odds. "All right," Harlan began, trying to project authority even as he stifled a yawn. "Quick status check. Etta, how the upgrade's coming?" "Slow but steady," she replied. "We're working with scraps, but we'll make it work." "And communications?" Thane asked, turning to Dahlia. She shrugged. "Touch and go. Earth says they're holding their ground, but they're stretched thin." "Figures," Vex said, ever the skeptic. "We're all just holding on by our fingernails." "You got fingernails," Mira joked. "Luxury." Thane settled into his chair, a little more worn than when he'd first taken command, but still standing. "We've got a long haul ahead of us, but if this little rock's taught me anything, it's that humanity's like one of those stubborn weeds. We just keep coming back." "We're adaptable," Mira agreed. "And a bit insane, which helps." "Insanity's been our best ally so far," Gareth pointed out. "Keeps us unpredictable." Harlan steered them back on course. "Let's stay focused. We need to keep the lattice running, turrets operational, and repairs ongoing. We're not out of the woods yet." "If we find any woods, let me know," Vex said. "Could use a change of scenery." With plans laid out and optimism cautiously reinstalled, they disbanded for the evening. Thane took a moment to himself, surveying the motley crew he'd somehow become responsible for. Mira joined him, quiet for once. "You think we're making a difference?" she asked, watching the stars blink back at them. "We've survived," Thane said. "That's something." "And if the aliens come back," she pressed. "We'll greet them with a proper lunar welcome, same as always." She nodded, satisfied with the non-answer. "This place, it's starting to feel like home, in a weird, might explode at any moment kind of way." "Guess we'd better keep it from exploding then." They lingered there, the silence companionable, both aware that the peace was temporary. But for now, it was enough. Enough to recharge, to regroup, to prepare for whatever cosmic curveball the universe would throw next. "Here's to tomorrow," Thane said, raising a pretend glass to the stars. "Yeah," Mira agreed. "And to the next impossible thing we'll somehow pull off." The colony settled into an uneasy quiet, the kind that comes with the knowledge that the reprieve was short-lived. But in that moment, under the unforgiving light of distant stars, they were a little less alone. And as Thane and Mira stood watch over their ragtag family, it was enough. For now, at least.